Hey YouTube. Alright, so I got the front bolster back on the tractor and I'm getting ready to put the front axle back on now. Just wanted to give a little update on how everything's looking so far. Finally got it all cleaned, stripped, and primered. All the bolts have been all retapped and rethreaded, and yeah, it's been a fun little venture. This thing, it's definitely been a very fun tractor to work on. So here's just a little bit of how everything came out. I used red oxide primer just to help inhibit some more, any future rust, even though the tractor's gonna see the rest of its days in an enclosed area rather than sitting out in the weather. But so far, everything is coming out great on it. All the fluids have been changed, so there's no more whipped cream inside the units. All the seals have been replaced in the transmission, the final drive, replaced all the fluid out of the touch controls. I think the worst part of the whole thing was actually getting this rear rim off. This is the weighted rim, but it was completely rusted and pretty much seized onto the final drive. I let that soak for probably about 2 or 3 days, penetrating fluid. Obviously, I didn't want to put heat on it because with the seals being in the rear axle. Actually, the easiest way I found to get that off, I used a hammer, started tapping on it, block of wood, tried to drive it from the other side, tried the jack idea, didn't work. What I actually found worked very well was a tire breaker bar from Harbor Freight. This actually was the perfect angle where once I got it inside locked on the rim, I was actually able to give it a nice press. And once I was holding the pressure, tap the other side very lightly with a hammer, and with the angle of this, for some reason, was actually easier to get in there than a pry bar. So if you have a problem getting that one off, obviously remember, the right side of the tractor is the weighted rim, and the left side of the tractor is just the standard rim. The reason they do that, in case anybody doesn't know, is to offset the weight of the engine. Weight it goes on this side, unweighted goes on that side to keep the tractor from tipping. But if you have any questions as far as what I did, as far as getting that rear hub off, feel free to message. But other than that, I am actually getting ready to start putting on the front axle. And once I get that all installed, I'll show you as far as, well, actually I might be able to do it now because obviously I'm not hooking up the tie rods. But with it being on now, let's see if I can show it. So I'm going to go ahead and give us a turn, and then you can watch the front as far as it's, like I said, it's very minimal. It's hardly any play in the steering whatsoever. So this should definitely make, pretty much as soon as I touch it, it reacts. So as long as I get all those front tie rods, tightened up real nice, re-greased, I don't think this thing should have much play. I think it might go about maybe ½ inch to the right, ½ inch to the left before it grabs. But again, that's going with the original gear and the original shaft itself for the steering column. So definitely quite happy with that. So let me go ahead and set this up on the stand, and then we'll start getting this front end bolted back in. And got to drive, obviously put the center shaft up into this hole right here, and then drive the pin through. And then obviously when you do the pin, let me go ahead and grab it. As far as the bolt right there, you got to make sure you actually get it lined up with that half moon. So when you drive this pin in, make sure it's upside down, drive it through nice and straight, and then you should be able to get that in. So let me go ahead and set it up. Alright, everything's up and ready. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of oil in here just to go ahead and make it a little smoother and easier to get in. me grab my rubber hammer. Obviously, you want to be careful pounding on this. You don't want to mess up that bushing that's up inside the axle. Should I grab out of here? Right there. There. Nice and smooth. Turn this back around. Alright, that's straight. To the back side, and I'm going to have to turn this just a little bit. There. Looks like it should go right through. Alright, flashlight. It's a little dark back here. A little bit this way. There we go. Sure this didn't move. Yep, looks good. Good there. So yes, these can be quite difficult sometimes, but it is achievable with one person to actually do this. Just take your time, go slow. The last thing you want to do is start driving this front end on and having it knock out the jack stand. That's pulling the tractor up. That would be definitely really bad. Like that. You didn't have to tap that in. It's hard to see. What I'm going to do is once I get everything all snugged up, tightened up, I'm going to get the console back on, the upper and lower water housing, get the U-bolt mounted back in, and then once I get everything back together the way I want it, I'm going to go ahead and touch up everything with the primer, and then again let it sit for a little bit, and then I'm looking by Wednesday I should be shooting the red paint on here. So let me go ahead and get these bolts snugged up. wipe all that down with some mineral spirits afterwards, just as well. Let's get any little spots of grease out there. Alright, that's all wiped down good. Now I gotta clean my hands. I have to make sure I post some pictures of this also. The tunnel for the transmission tube. I had to evict a little mouse motel that was up inside there. But I didn't have any leaks on this tractor anywhere through any of the tubes back there. I mean, there really wasn't many leaks on this thing. The front and rear main seal was actually good, no drips. Inside the transmission, as far as the backside where it actually mounts the tube to the tranny, that was good. The final drive seals actually mounted to the side of the transmission as well, good. Axle seals weren't leaking. Really the only thing that was leaking was the bottom of the final drive, which is a good thing anyway. I pulled those. One was full of gear oil, but it also had about that much sludge and whipped cream in the bottom of it where water was getting in at one point. And then the one on the right side had almost no oil in it at all. So that one had a pretty bad leak. Everything was wet around it, so all the oil on that one obviously went out. I went ahead and I put I think it's 85-140 gear oil in the final drives and the transmission, just to help quiet things down. I'm probably going to do the same thing in the front end. I'm probably just going to use the 85-140. And then as far as the final drive, sorry, not the final drive, the touch controls, I actually used a 30 weight, I believe that was a detergent oil that I was told to use in there. So that's actually what I used as far as in the touch controls. And again, that was completely filled with, is pure whipped cream inside there. There really hardly was any actual good oil in there whatsoever. So don't be scared to jump in and start pulling plugs, draining stuff out, because I mean, if anything, it's just, you know, it'll outlast our lifetime once we do this, you know. So when we pass these on to different generations, you know, these tractors still keep on ticking. So, all right, so enough talking. Let's go ahead and get this, I guess I can go ahead and lower this front end back down now, and let's get this U-bolt back on. Oh, and if you noticed, I went ahead, let me see if I can move this. To make this front end a little easier to get on, I counterbalanced it by turning this wheel, towing it in. That wheel, I towed it back the opposite way. That kind of helped balance the front end out, so that way it wasn't trying to roll forward or roll backwards and then keep from lining that pin up. So if you want to make this front end a little easier, kick your one wheel one way, kick your other wheel the other way. That will actually pretty much balance this thing out to true, and then makes it much easier to jack this straight up and then get that pin in. As far as this front bolster unit itself, that was easy enough just by myself to go ahead and just lift it up. I went ahead and put, you know, a couple of the bolts in, lifted up, and then just kind of pushed it right in place. And then as I held it up in place, just pop the bolts the rest of the way through, tighten them up. So this was extremely simple putting back on yourself. A lot of people will take, obviously, and put the bolster to the front axle, try to slide the whole thing in. Problem is with that is, obviously anybody who's done it knows that it will rotate back and forth on the pins. So you got to go ahead and shove your blocks of wood, your wedges under there, But if it's already primered like this, then you're going to risk scratching all your primer up. Once you get those bolsters, support it with the blocks of wood, then you got to worry about this thing rotating backwards, forward, because it's a lot more weight and it's a lot more awkward. And then with having the steering shaft coming off there, you don't want to go hitting your controls. So honestly, much easier to do it in 2 stages. Put your front bolster assembly to the front of your engine, then put your axle in. Way easier. Alright, so let me go ahead and put the stand back, and then I'm going to go ahead and start working on dropping this jack. Okay, that's pretty simple. So I went ahead and put the blocks under the front wheels. Now to keep this thing from tipping on you, since obviously the way I have it now sitting on the jacks, I have it on blocks here. So that way obviously once I spray it, put the wheels back on, it's easy enough to go ahead and go underneath, mix up the same paint, touch-up gun, go ahead and just spray those bottom sides real easy. Obviously taping everything up, and then you can take care of the spots that you don't hit with the paint. One thing you want to be careful of obviously is, once you block this thing up this way, you don't have any wedges under here. So this unit can still rotate. That side over there will lift and start going down on this side here with the way this thing is offset like this, without any shims being underneath there. So just to be safe, go ahead and put a jack stand under the left rear side. Keep that thing positioned as you're letting this jack down and sitting it on here. This way the tractor itself won't do any of its rotating, because the last thing you want to do is take a tractor, even in this condition here, as far as everything stripped off of it, it's got to be every bit of 1,500 pounds sitting here. So last thing you want to do is see this thing flip off the jack, land on its side. You're going to have to get a lot of buddies, engine crane, you name it, to try to get this thing righted and back on, and then pray you didn't bend or break anything. So, alright, let me go ahead and get this back down. Actually, while I do have it up, so here's all the other parts. So I went ahead and obviously everything's been sandblasted, everything's been primed. Now this unit here, obviously, let me see, I got so much stuff in the way right now. This right here, on a lot of the offset tractors, will be broken through here. This one right here was really in bad shape. This whole thing right here was split. It was broke through here. It was starting to crack all the way down to the front inside here. Somebody did try to weld it. Problem is, they welded it up in this area. The brake itself was actually inside there. Let me sit this down real easy. So if you got a situation where this steering arm itself is broke from everybody grabbing the steering wheel through the years and using that to hoist themselves up, don't just repair it up in here. Go up underneath here, re-weld the bracket to the housing, go inside here where the bottom tube is, weld that back to the bracket, weld the bracket back to the housing here, and as well as I went up and welded it inside here. So you could actually hang on this thing now. It's not going to break anytime soon, but I'm also going to end up putting a step on the tractor to alleviate this problem ever happening again in the future. But if you ever have that issue, make sure you weld it up inside here. Weld the bracket back to the housing. Don't just weld up here where the brake is, because it's going to break again. Alright, enough of my 2-bit information. Let me spin this back around. Alright, that looks good. Gotta have the coffee. Alright. Let's grab this U-bolt. It's so much nicer working on this now without 15 pounds worth of grease up inside here. This definitely makes it way more enjoyable. Alright, I'm going to have to spread this, keep from scratching this up. Give me a second here. Okay. Wasn't too bad. So I went ahead and I was going to go ahead and get a spreader. One of the reverse clamps put in here, spread this apart, but I was actually able to go ahead and just spread this, just not get this in here. not too bad. Now, I hope I didn't spread it too much. We're good. Probably not the easiest to get your fingers in there. First instinct, so it was 3/4, and I'll check the other one. That's good. Back in business. Yeah, see how happy I am with that. That's awesome. Alright, well, now I'm going to start getting the front grill mount back on. Looks good. Alright, let me go grab the bolts. I think they're still in the other shop. Yeah, that's the bad part about running stuff in 2 shops. I went ahead and grabbed most of the stuff that I already had primed up there. Excuse me. Alright, go ahead and get this positioned. Here. I think there's something actually inside there. The same list. You can't get everything you try, but apparently something you still miss. Grab a screwdriver for that. Everything out. Let's try it again. So that was about today. This is alright. Alright, this sounds good. Now I'm just going to snug these up just a little bit, just so they don't go rotating and falling off, because obviously I still got to line these up. Yeah, I was going to go ahead and buy new headlights for the tractor, but you know, figure these have been lighting its way for 70 years, so why not just go ahead and rebuild them? Put new seals on them, put new lenses on them. Probably going to go ahead and, some of the chrome was actually bad on the inside. They weren't awful, But I'm going to go ahead and replace the chrome backing. You know, so the paint obviously isn't going to reflect the same way. I had to replace this too on the tractor because I guess at one point the front of the tractor was used for a battering ram, and the original one was actually, the bolt was pointing up completely and the grill has been all pushed in. For the most part, I got the grill banged back out and I got most of the fins straight. I pulled all the mesh off the back so I can replace the mesh screen. But I had to go ahead and I was straightening up the original, but trying to get this exact curvature back in exactly the way it is to get this lined up with the grill. Just wasn't really working since I didn't have another one to go off of. Ended up paying 40 bucks just for that bracket, but it's worth it at least to make sure that the grill lines back up. And then obviously once this is all painted, and actually before it's painted, back up here, once I get the water pump housing on, I got the arm that actually goes on the front that locks the grill in on the sides as well as here. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to bring the grill out, I'm going to sit it in place, and I'm going to get this pretty close to being where it needs to be lined up, tighten the bolts. I'm trying to eliminate anywhere I can to, once I paint everything, and then I go ahead and reassemble a lot of the nuts and bolts. Obviously, you paint your bolts, you put your wrench on, no matter what you do when you go cranking them things down, you're going to flake all the paint back off the bolts. I know it's inevitable, it's going to happen some places, but I'm trying to eliminate it where I can and how I can. So if there's certain things I can go ahead and assemble now, get its position where it needs to be, get them locked down, get it all dialed in, I don't have to go back in the future with a wrench and turn it. If I do, the way I am, once I see it, it's going to bother me if I see chip bolts. So I'll probably go back and clean up the chip areas. I'm probably going to mix the paint the same way I did, but I'm probably not going to reduce it as much, so that way I can actually use like a brush and I'm going to go around and touch all the bolts back up. I know that's going a little far for a tractor, but again, it's not going to be a piece of farm equipment really anymore. It's more parades, more shows, more hay rides for kids, like, you know, letting the tractor now be in its glory days. So yeah, it's worth it. It's your own tractor. Just baby it if you want. So nobody will understand until they actually own their own tractor, and then they'll realize, yeah, you know, it's actually fun to take care of these things and play with them, and you know, go a little above and beyond as far as what we do when we restore these things. But you know, it's a piece of history. And the sad thing is, everything and everybody out there seems like they're trying to do their best to erase a lot of history. Well, you know what? Farming is a big part of history and the future still. So restoring the old iron, if anything, just continues to pay homage to the farming community. Because obviously without farmers, no matter if some people out there say, why do you need farmers? You can just go to the grocery store and buy groceries and buy your veggies and all. Yeah, think about what you just said. But sadly, I don't think a lot of people think about what they say. Yeah, no farmers, there is no crops. So yeah, sometimes it's not even worth even addressing the stupidity that we hear day in and day out, but what can you do? It seems like that's part of life too. Alright, get back to the tractor. I'm going to go ahead and I think these are actually sitting, yeah, they're actually sitting pretty true. That will go like that. I'm going to actually angle these down just a touch. I want them like the path, not like the tops of the trees. So I'm going to tilt them a little bit to about there. That. I'll lock that nut down afterwards. headlights was pretty damaged at 1.2. Looks like unfortunately the headlight and the ring ran something. So I had to go ahead and beat the ring that goes around it back out and re-straighten all the tabs. Nothing major. Again, it would have been a lot easier just to go ahead and replace the headlights, but more I can keep it as original, I'd rather. Alright, let's see if I got this at the same angle. Yes, they're not pointing straight up. Again, like I said, I want to kind of like the ground in front of me, not light the middle of the trees up. I'm pretty sure I'm going to go back and readjust these in the future, but so it needs to be pretty much where I want. When I sandblast and prime these, I didn't sandblast and prime the insides. The insides still have the black coating and then the brass contact that's inside there. So I didn't want to disrupt anything inside. Looks good. Both of them at a nice angle. Alright, that's a keeper. Just gotta lock these down. Yeah, that's good. Alright, I like that. Install it like that, it's good. Alright, it's coming together. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this housing on the back. Now what I did on this was I cleaned up as far as for the actual console. I went ahead and wire wheeled, let me get my hand in there, the bolts back down, cleaned all these up. Reason being is I didn't want, apologize for that. I didn't want the bolts having a lot of primer paint on them because obviously the console is actually where the positive ground is going to be. So I didn't want to have any issues with the primer and everything inside. So I went ahead and I already tapped out the bolt. I'm going to run these back a couple times in and through, and then I'm going to go ahead and set that console down on there. So give me a second and I'll set back up. Alright, let's go ahead and run these bolts in a couple times here. Take that washer off. And once I go ahead and get this console mounted back down, and I know it's a bare metal contact from the threads to the actual tractor chassis itself, I'm going to go ahead and prime the tops of these bolts once this is sitting back down on there. Again, the only reason I'm doing this is just to go ahead and re-chase these a little bit, just to get a little bit of the primer back out of the holes. That looks good. That looks good. All right, let's go ahead and get that housing. First, I'm going to pull off the steering knuckle. Now another little bit of information. The original steering knuckle that was on there, obviously through the years, steering the wheel, the shaft on the steering column itself starts to get scratched up on the paint, and then it starts getting a lot of goop inside here. It'll get old paint inside here, so after a while you keep turning and turning and turning, it just tears the paint, tears the shaft up, gums up, thickens up. Steering again, a little stiffer than it needs to be. So I went ahead and took a Dremel inside, I cleaned this out really good, kind of gave it a nice new finish on the inside of the surface, and then I went ahead and I chamfered with the Dremel again, the outside of this edge just a little bit so it's not so sharp cutting into the edges of the paint. Then I went in with a wire polishing wheel, and I actually polished. This is actually blue tape in there right now, so obviously if you're thinking, oh, he didn't polish anything, that shit's blue. It's actually polished. I went ahead and I taped this up, just a no primer, nothing got on that polished surface. So this way, when I slide this back over the steering column in position, pull it off, I know once this thing gets greased, it'll be nice and slick, nice and smooth inside there, and I don't have to worry about all those scratches appearing off the steering wheel. But you won't see them anyway, because now with this console being welded and tight, it won't be moving around anymore. So just something small, something simple. It only took a few minutes to get this done. But again, if you're worried about keeping the tractor like as perfect as possible with driving it, go ahead and just polish the inside. All right, so let's go ahead and set this one. One bolt wants to fight me a little bit. There we go, on this housing. There we got it. Another thing I forgot to mention, the clutch pedal itself actually was pretty good. The left brake pedal also was actually pretty good. So I don't have a lot of wobble on the shafts on that, but I'm guessing through the years, the right brake pedal actually got used. Gotta love when that slips off, right? The right brake pedal got used a lot more than the left one. So apparently they weren't locked together too often. So the right pedal obviously started getting a lot of play where I pushed down on the pedal, it would move a lot to the side. So they actually had that hole inside there, wobbled out pretty good. So I took that pedal off, took it inside, and went ahead and cleaned it apart, stripped it apart, sanded it, polished the shaft up to make it a little smoother, and then I went ahead and took some brass, and actually pretty much about as thin as a beer bottle, a beer can, cut it into my pieces, and it was only enough that I needed to make I think 1.5 wraps of that brass to go in there, and then it snugged that pedal right back up. So obviously, for the most part, the two pedals are always going to be locked on this tractor, so when you push the brakes, it's obviously going to be left and right brakes always stopping, but apparently they use the right brake way more. So that pedal was pretty worn out. So everything's actually good on it now. So again, once I get all this done, I'll start assembling that pedal. And I went ahead and bought 3 new springs for the clutch and both brakes, because that's cheap. 15 bucks for a set of springs. And again, that'll put new life back in those pedals. Much better than trying to use those old pedals. So this is actually good, and this is in. This was actually one of the first things I took off this tractor. The steering column being busted, it was in pretty bad shape. So that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and just get the steering knuckle back in. I don't have the bolt that I want yet to put this in, so the bolt that I'm actually putting in is temporary. It's just been cut down. So now I'm just trying to get the tape out of the inside here. As you can see so far, how shiny it is inside there. So that's nice and smooth. So this will definitely make a nice difference turning the tractor. Obviously, once you go ahead and grease this all up, I'm only going to grease it a little bit. I'm not going to pump it out so it's shooting out the sides. There you go. Even I'll put my dirty fingers inside there. You can see how much better it looks inside. Alright, yep, we reposition again and get this knuckle put on. Alright, so unfortunately, I went ahead and installed the water housings. I forgot to hit play on the record, so I apologize for that, for not doing a step-by-step here, but you guys didn't miss much. Basically all I did was I went ahead and put a little bit of Teflon tape on the drain plug. I didn't obviously put any kind of thread sealant on the bolts. I don't really think it's necessary on here, because it's actually got an enclosed housing for the threads, so it's not like it actually runs through inside the block to the water jackets. But I went ahead and did put a very light coat of the black gasket sealant on both sides of the gasket. Most likely it's not necessary, but I did a thin coat anyway and bolted it up because I just don't want any future leaks. Once this dries, I'm going to go with an X-Acto and cut that edge off real easy, so that way once it's all primed and painted, it's clean. Same thing I did with up here. Went ahead and just put a little bit of gasket sealant on here. Didn't have to worry about any thread sealant on here because, again, these don't go through the head into the water jacket. They're actually in a cupped housing for the threads, so you don't have to put any sealant on these. So really the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to end up bringing out the grill, setting the grill on here, getting this lined up where it needs to be, so that way everything sits good, and then I'll snug that bolt down, and then I'm going to go ahead and honestly, the next video is going to be showing getting some paint on here, because I'm just going to go and start touching up some of the bolts, some of the areas here and there need to be touched up. I went ahead and did a whole speech as far as the paint that I'm using, but apparently it wasn't recording, so we're going to try this again. I personally like the Magic paint. I know a lot of people don't like it. There's some people who do. I like this red. I use this red on the Case tractor. I know Case is supposed to be Case orange. I went ahead and did it red. At some point I might go ahead and throw up a little video showing that Case tractor from beginning to end. It actually made it in Tractor Digest magazine, so that was actually pretty cool because the tractor actually came out really nice from the condition it was in. But I'm going to go ahead and use this on the whole chassis. On the hood, the grill, and the gas tank, I'm going to do something a little different. Not going to say exactly what I'm going to do, but once it's shown in the end, it's going to look pretty good. Tractor's definitely going to stand out nice. And as far as getting a little bit more of a shine to this than I did last time, I'm going to go ahead and use the catalyst and the hardener. Once I start painting this, I'll show you how I'm going to mix it up. But then obviously to spray it, you need the reducer also. Trying to think what else I was saying in that last video before I realized it wasn't recording. So I'm going to move on over here. So the reason I have the valve cover completely taped up is because I actually Cerakoted the valve cover in a graphite black, because we do Cerakoting. Reason being is from this tractor, obviously the engine was seized up from all the water getting inside the intake. The inside of the valve cover was rusted pretty bad. So I went ahead and I went in, sandblasted it out, used a hand wire brush, got inside all the baffles, cleaned everything really good inside there. Once I got it all sandblasted and cleaned out, I went ahead and Cerakoted it inside and outside graphite black. Another reason is because even though this thing doesn't have like a lot of pressure in the oil pump where it's really going to throw that oil, it's still going to pump it, it's still going to sling a little bit inside there. But I didn't want any chance of moisture collecting anywhere under this valve cover and starting to rust this thing out again from the inside for any reason. So obviously I know with it being with the Cerakote inside there, it's going to help keep that oil circulating, and it's not going to rust inside here. Because the last thing you want to do is after you've done rebuilt it, put in new sleeves, new pistons, new everything, you really don't want rust circulating through and then starting to tear up your cylinder walls. I did the same thing to the fan assembly. I was going to go ahead and use the original fan assembly for here, but the original fan assembly obviously has a screw on the top. You pull the screw out, you fill it up with motor oil, and that's actually what lubricates the bearings inside. While the new assemblies obviously is a sealed bearing. You don't have to go in and oil those up anymore. I went ahead and I sandblasted and did the fan, did the pulley, did everything all new Cerakote, new bolts, new screws. But I like the idea of actually a sealed bearing being on there. So I got the fan that I Cerakoted on the shelf. That's just going to be a backup in case I ever need it. I'll go ahead and grab it. But I'm not going to run it. I'm going to go ahead and run the new one. But I mean, that's how it looks. Again, this thing was all dinged up on the edges. Things, I'm guessing stuff went in there, debris. Had the edges of the fans all dinged up, so I went ahead and sanded it and cleaned and smoothed all the edges. Sandblasted it, and it's a little dusty, but shot it with the graphite black Cerakote. So everything turned out nice, but yeah, just something about the idea of the seal bearing. I like that much better. Other than that, that's it. Everything's together. So I'll take a quick walk around, kind of show you progress we made today. Getting the front end back on, looks good. Headlights are on. Water housings are on. Governor. And went ahead and got the console mounted back on. Go ahead and make my makeshift booth inside here to keep red paint from sticking on everything. But as you see, tractor looks 1,000 times better. I'm probably gonna put the brake assembly on. I might do that tomorrow. Get that done before paint. But let's see if I can walk around here without tripping on anything. I usually always show the left side of the tractor all the love and don't show enough on the right side. Tractor definitely has, I mean, like any tractor, a lot of casting marks in it, but I didn't want to sand smooth and take care of any of the casting marks. I actually, it's the character of the tractor, so couldn't see trying to get all that polish out again. It's not like it's a antique, show car. It's an antique tractor. Antique tractors are cast, so it is what it is. But everything came out really nice. I'm really happy with it so far. Extremely happy with the steering. Like I said, that couldn't be any happier with that. Looking forward to actually getting this thing together and starting it up again and driving it and actually getting to enjoy it. So stay tuned for the next video. It will actually be when we're putting the paint on here. Thanks for watching.